The wind moved softly across the endless golden desert of Lyra 9. Each gust lifted grains of pale dust that shimmered under two bright suns. The planet had been silent for ages. Only the whisper of sand and the far echo of shifting dunes filled the air. Long ago, people had lived here, at least that was what the story said. But now it was only a world of ruins, buried memories, and endless silence. Dr. Elias Ward stood at the edge of his small camp, staring at the horizon. He was a man in his late 30s, tall but modest in his presence. His eyes carried a quiet curiosity that refused to fade, no matter how many years he had spent chasing lost civilizations. His hands were rough from work, his clothes covered in dust, yet there was a spark in his heart that no hardship could put out. He was not searching for gold or fame. He searched for answers, for something that could make humanity understand its place in the vast universe. He had come to Lyra 9 following old star maps, translated from stone tablets found on the moon of Thalera. The inscription spoke of the City of Light, a place where the people of the stars had once walked beside humans. Most scientists laughed at the idea. They said it was only legend, a story told by miners to make the empty nights seem less lonely. But Elias believed that every story came from a seed of truth. That morning, the scanners had shown a strange signal under the sand, an energy reading unlike anything known to human instruments. The signal pulsed gently like a heartbeat. It was deep below, maybe 10 meters down, near an area where ancient pillars half buried in dunes stood like broken teeth. Elias adjusted his hat and spoke into his communicator. "Ray, I think I've found something. The readings are stable, still rhythmic," a calm voice replied through the static. "You sure it's not equipment feedback again?" Elias smiled faintly. "If it is, then my scanner just learned to breathe." He shut the link and knelt down, brushing the sand with a soft brush. The sun was hot, but the thrill of discovery cooled his mind. Slowly he began to dig. Hours passed. The wind changed, carrying the scent of ozone, unusual for a dry world. Something beneath was reacting. Then his small metal spade struck something solid. Clink. The sound was gentle, almost shy, but it made Elias freeze. He cleared the sand faster, brushing layer after layer until a faint golden edge appeared. It looked like metal, yet when he touched it, it felt warm, alive. Beneath that surface, light flickered for a second, then vanished. Elias leaned closer, whispering to himself, "What are you?" He uncovered more of the structure. It wasn't a chest or a statue. It was a smooth surface shaped like a capsule, almost oval, about 3 meters long. Delicate carvings covered it, patterns that looked like flowing water frozen in time. Each line met another in a design too perfect for coincidence. The air around it felt different, thicker somehow, as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. He took a small recorder from his belt and began to describe what he saw, his voice trembling slightly with excitement. Object approximately 3 meters in length, crystalline surface with golden tint. Symbols unknown. Energy reading stable but increasing. Possible containment unit or ceremonial chamber. He pressed his palm against the crystal. It pulsed faintly beneath his touch. For a brief moment he imagined a heart beating beneath his hand. The idea startled him. He drew back quickly and laughed under his breath. "You're getting poetic, Ward. It's just an artifact." Yet something in him whispered that it wasn't just an artifact. By evening, his assistant Ray arrived on a hoversled, bringing fresh water and equipment. She was younger than Elias, full of bright energy and quick ideas. When she saw the discovery, her eyes widened. "Is that some kind of sarcophagus?" she asked, lowering her voice as if afraid to wake it. "I don't know yet," Elias said, crouching beside it. "But look at these markings. They aren't human, at least not any language we know." Ray ran her fingers near the symbols, careful not to touch. They almost looked like music. The curves, the rhythm, like a song written in light. Elias nodded slowly. "A song carved into stone," he murmured. They decided to set up lights and recorders around the site. Night came softly over the desert, painting the sky in purple and silver. The 2 moons of Lyra 9 rose, their glow reflecting on the crystal object, making it shimmer like a sleeping star. Ray prepared a small dinner by the fire while Elias studied the carvings. "You ever think," he said suddenly, "that maybe we aren't the first to look at the stars and wonder who's out there?" Ray smiled. "Of course, but you actually go out and find the answers. That's the difference." Elias chuckled quietly. Maybe I'm just stubborn. The night grew colder. The wind softened to a whisper. Somewhere in the dark, the crystal pulsed once more, faint but clear, like the soft beat of a heart that had waited too long to be heard. In the early hours of dawn, Elias awoke suddenly. The desert was glowing faintly blue. He looked toward the capsule. It was no longer still. The symbols across its surface shimmered gently like stars caught beneath ice. He rushed to the console and checked his readings. The energy levels were rising again. No external cause, no radiation, no solar activity. The energy was coming from inside. Ray joined him, half awake and wide-eyed. "What's happening?" "I don't know," he whispered. "It's alive, alive," she repeated, staring at him. Before he could answer, a sound filled the air. Not loud, but pure. A hum, almost like a distant choir rising from the sand itself. The crystal's glow brightened for a moment, then faded again, leaving silence behind. Elias knelt beside it. "It responded to something," he said softly. "Maybe to us," Ray frowned. "Or maybe it's waking up." He looked at her, unsure whether to laugh or to agree. The thought sounded impossible, yet every part of him believed it. The next day, they continued their study carefully. Elias documented every detail. The precise pattern of the carvings, the gentle hum that returned every few hours, the faint warmth that spread through the ground. Ray took soil samples, hoping to understand what kind of energy could last here for thousands, maybe millions of years. By afternoon, Elias found something else, a seal at the base of the capsule, half covered in sand. It was circular, with symbols that reminded him of constellations. He brushed it slowly, revealing the full design, a set of 7 stars arranged in a spiral. At the center was a single crystal, dull and dark. When he touched the center, the crystal flickered faintly, then settled. It reminded him of an old keyhole waiting for something to fit. That night, the desert air carried a strange calm. Elias sat by the capsule, writing notes in his digital log. The glow of his tablet painted his face in soft light. He paused for a moment, feeling oddly emotional. "I don't know who you were," he whispered, glancing at the capsule. "But if someone buried you here, they must have loved you enough to keep you safe." A soft wind moved through the dunes, almost as if answering him. The capsule pulsed faintly again. Elias froze. It wasn't imagination this time. The glow brightened at the sound of his voice, then faded when he stopped speaking. He tested it. "Hello?" The crystal brightened again, a little longer this time. Ray, who had been half asleep near the fire, sat up. "Did you see that?" Elias nodded slowly. "It's reacting to sound, maybe to emotion." They both stared at the capsule, realizing that they were not alone anymore. Later that night, while Ray slept, Elias stayed awake beside the glowing object. He felt a connection growing, something beyond science, beyond reason. As he traced the patterns on the surface, he noticed a faint reflection. It wasn't his own. Inside the crystal, behind the layers of golden light, there was a shadow of a figure. Graceful, still, peaceful. A chill ran through him. "A person," he breathed. "There's someone in there." He stood slowly, backing away. His heart raced, yet awe filled his mind more than fear. He called Ray immediately. She hurried over, still drowsy, but when she saw the faint outline, her breath caught. "It's a body," Elias finished softly. "But not human." The figure's shape was delicate, almost luminous even in rest. Fine silver strands, perhaps hair, floated inside, and a faint shimmer of light ran across the chest area in a rhythm too perfect to be random. It looked like breathing. Ray whispered, "It's alive." Elias nodded slowly, his voice trembling. Or, "It's dreaming." As dawn rose again, the two stood in silence, staring at the being sleeping inside the golden crystal. Around them, the desert seemed to hold its breath. Elias placed a hand gently on the glass, his voice filled with wonder. "What looked like treasure," he said quietly, "might be something far greater." The light within the capsule pulsed one final time, steady and strong as if agreeing with him, and in that moment, under the twin suns of Lyra 9, Dr. Elias Ward realized he hadn't found a lost fortune. He had uncovered a secret that could change the story of every living world. The desert sun had already begun its slow climb into the sky when Elias and Ray stood silently in front of the capsule. The strange figure inside the crystal was still, its glowing outline now almost faint under the morning light. Elias couldn't tear his eyes away from it. There was something mesmerizing about the way the figure seemed to live within the glowing crystal, almost as if it was waiting for something, someone to awaken it. He ran his hand over the cool surface of the capsule again, feeling the pulse of energy that had become so familiar now. The glow was faint at first, but when his fingers pressed down slightly, it flickered brighter. Ray, still standing a few steps away, watched with a mix of disbelief and wonder. "Is it alive?" she asked softly, as though afraid to disturb the moment. "I don't know," Elias replied, his voice tinged with awe. "But it feels like it's waiting for something. Or someone." He stepped back, his mind racing. There had to be an explanation, but nothing in his training had prepared him for something like this. He had always imagined he'd find lost treasures or artifacts, maybe even some ancient relics, but this was something else entirely. A being trapped in a crystal. Ray took a few cautious steps forward. "I think we need to figure out how to get it out. If it's alive, we can't just leave it here." Elias nodded, though his mind was still caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. "Right, but how?" He glanced around as if expecting the answer to appear in the desert winds. "We need to figure out how it works first. Maybe there's a way to communicate with it." For hours they tried everything they could think of. They scanned the capsule for any hidden mechanisms, any switches or levers that might unlock it. They touched the surface, spoke softly to it, and even tried to replicate the humming sound they had heard the night before. Nothing worked. As the afternoon wore on, exhaustion began to set in. They sat down beside the capsule, each lost in their thoughts. The desert around them was still and silent, the only sound the wind whispering through the dunes. "I'm starting to think it's hopeless," Ray said after a long silence. "Maybe we should just leave it and report back. There's no way we're getting this thing open." Elias looked at the capsule, then at Ray. "We're not giving up," he said firmly. "Something inside that capsule is waiting. It's alive in some way. I can feel it." Ray frowned. "You really think so? After all this time?" "It's been buried for centuries, Elias. We don't know what we're dealing with here." "I know," Elias said, "but it's not just a piece of treasure. It's something more." His voice softened as he spoke, the weight of the moment settling in his chest. He had never been a man to believe in the supernatural or in things that couldn't be explained by science. But this was different. The feeling in the air around the capsule, the energy, it was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Ray sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "I get it. But how do we wake it up? We need a plan." Elias stood up, his mind still racing. "I don't know yet, but there has to be a way. We're not giving up." It was the sound that came next that would change everything. It started as a soft vibration, almost too faint to hear, but it grew steadily, like a hum building in strength. At first, Elias thought it was the wind, but then the ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble, and the capsule's glow intensified, brighter than before. Ray stood up quickly, eyes wide. "What's happening?" she gasped. Elias didn't answer at first. He was too busy watching the surface of the crystal, which had begun to shift. The golden hue was fading in places, revealing what appeared to be intricate markings beneath the surface. As the hum grew louder, a deep resonating sound echoed from within the capsule. It wasn't a mechanical noise, but something far more organic. It was alive. The figure inside the capsule began to stir. The silver strands of hair floated around the figure's head like a halo. The once still form now shifted gently, as if waking from a long, peaceful sleep. Elias took a step forward, his heart racing. Ray grabbed his arm, her breath catching in her throat. "Is it moving?" she whispered. Elias didn't reply. His eyes were fixed on the figure inside the crystal. It was changing, slowly but unmistakably. The figure's fingers twitched. Then the hand moved. It was a delicate movement, like the smallest of gestures, but it was a movement nonetheless. "Holy!" Ray's voice trailed off, and for a moment neither of them spoke. They could only watch in stunned silence. The figure's eyes opened. At first, Elias thought he was seeing things. The eyes were so bright, glowing like stars. It wasn't just the color, it was the depth. There was so much life in them, so much intelligence. The eyes locked onto his, and for a moment the world around Elias seemed to stop. "Who are you?" The voice came suddenly, not through the air but in his mind, clear and strong. Elias staggered back, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't understand. Was this telepathy? Was the figure communicating with him without speaking? The figure's eyes blinked slowly, and it spoke again. Why am I here? Who has come for me? The voice was soft, yet carried the weight of centuries. Elias opened his mouth to respond, but the words stuck in his throat. His mind was racing. I'm Dr. Elias Ward. I found you, he managed to say, though his voice trembled. I don't know what you are, or where you're from. The figure shifted again, sitting up fully within the capsule. The light surrounding it began to pulse rhythmically like a heartbeat. It was beautiful, almost otherworldly. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. I am Lyriel, the figure said, her voice now clearer, more human. I am the last of the Seraphim. Elias swallowed hard. The Seraphim? He repeated. Who are they? What happened to them? Lyriel's eyes seemed to darken with sadness. We were the children of the stars, she said softly, her voice full of loss. We walked among your people once long ago, but we were betrayed. And now, I am the last one. The word struck Elias like a physical blow. His mind raced. This wasn't just a discovery, this was something far, far bigger than he had ever imagined. He had stumbled upon a history no one had known, a civilization lost to time, a race of beings who had once shared the stars with humanity. I don't understand, Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. Betrayed by who? What happened to your people? Lyriel's gaze softened as she looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand him as much as he was trying to understand her. The Ravagers came, she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. They came in the dark and they took everything. My people tried to fight, but we were too few. Her words hung in the air, thick with grief. Ray stepped closer, her expression full of concern. Is that why you were sealed away? She asked gently. Lyriel nodded slowly. Yes, my father, the king of the Seraphim, sealed me away in the crystal to protect me. He thought that I could survive until the day my people returned. She paused, a flicker of pain crossing her features. But I have waited alone for so long. The desert around them was silent, the wind stilling as if it too had listened to her words. Elias felt his heart tighten with sympathy. This wasn't just a discovery of an ancient race, it was a story of survival, of loss, and of waiting for something that might never come. Do you want to leave? Elias asked quietly. We can take you somewhere safe. There must be others out there. There's a whole galaxy waiting for you. Lyriel shook her head slowly, her eyes full of a sadness Elias couldn't quite understand. I am the last of my kind, Dr. Ward. There is no going back. But I can never forget my people. Elias felt a heavy weight in his chest. This discovery was no longer just about ancient history or treasure. It was about something deeper, something more painful. He had found not just a lost princess, but a soul adrift in time, separated from everything she had ever known. But the question remained, what would they do now? Could they truly help her? Or had they uncovered something they weren't prepared to face? The silence stretched on, the desert's wind whispering softly as Elias looked into Lyriel's glowing eyes, knowing that whatever happened. The world around Elias seemed to fade as he stared into Lyriel's eyes. She wasn't just a discovery, she was a story, a part of history lost for millennia. Her words echoed in his mind like a melody he couldn't quite understand, but one that he felt deep in his heart. I am the last of the Seraphim, Lyriel had said, her voice soft yet full of sorrow. The rest of my people, gone. Lost in the dark, Elias didn't know what to say. He had always prided himself on his intellect, his ability to uncover the secrets of the past. But this was more than any textbook could prepare him for. He had discovered more than an artifact. He had uncovered a soul, a living being who had survived in isolation for untold ages. The desert was quiet now. The wind, which had once been so persistent, seemed to hold its breath. Only the soft hum of the capsule remained, like the pulse of a living heart, reminding them that Lyriel was still there, waiting, even though time had forgotten her. Ray stood by, her eyes wide with disbelief, trying to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. What do we do now? She asked, her voice soft. Elias turned to her, his expression conflicted. I don't know. We can't just leave her here, Ray, but I don't think we can take her to the Galactic Council. They'll want to study her, control her. He clenched his fists, frustration building. She's not just some specimen. She's a person, a being, and she deserves more than that. Ray nodded, understanding his struggle. I agree, but she's the last of her kind. Who's going to protect her if not the Council? Elias ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts swirling. He couldn't just abandon Lyriel. She had been alone for so long. She needed answers, and so did he. The world was not ready for a discovery like this. But he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. The connection was undeniable. "I'll help you," Ray said softly. "We'll figure this out together. But we need to understand what she wants. We need to know what she remembers." Elias looked at her gratefully. "Thanks, Ray, you're right. We need to learn more about her history, her people, the Seraphim. We need to understand everything." The two of them turned back to Lyriel, who had remained motionless since her awakening. She was staring at them now, her glowing eyes filled with a quiet sadness. Elias could feel the weight of her gaze, as though she was waiting for him to make a decision, to decide her fate. That evening, after setting up their camp, Elias and Ray sat beside a small fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on the sand. They had spent hours discussing their options. The situation was delicate. They couldn't just take Lyriel to the Galactic Council, but neither could they leave her here alone in the middle of nowhere. They needed answers. They needed to understand what had happened to her people and why they had vanished. Elias had attempted to reach out to Lyriel through thought, as he had before. He had spoken to her softly, trying to form a connection that might help unlock her memories. But each time he tried, there was only a quiet silence in his mind. It was as if she was blocking him, unwilling to share more. Finally, after hours of quiet conversation, Lyriel's voice came to them again, but this time it was different. Instead of speaking through their minds, her words echoed softly in the air around them. I remember the stars," she said, her voice distant. "I remember the light of Seriphus, the city where we lived. My father, the king of the Seraphim, he told me stories of the past, of our people. I remember the laughter of children, the music we made, the way the light shone in our sky." Elias leaned forward, his heart pounding. "Can you tell us more?" "Please, Lyriel. We want to understand." For a long moment, Lyriel was silent. Then slowly she spoke again. "I remember. The darkness. The Ravagers came from the void, bringing destruction with them. They didn't speak like us. They didn't sing. They destroyed. My people fought, but we were too few. My father sealed me away to protect me. He thought I could survive, that I could wait." Elias's heart ached as he listened. The story she was telling wasn't one of glory or heroism. It was one of survival, of fear. The Ravagers had come, and the Seraphim had been powerless to stop them. All they had left were memories. Memories of a civilization that had once been beautiful, full of light and life. "I never wanted to be sealed away," Lyriel continued, her voice trembling. "But I understand why my father did it. I was the last hope of our people. He believed that one day I would awaken, and I would find the stars again, but now I'm alone. There is no one left." Elias felt a pang of sympathy for her. He couldn't even begin to imagine what it would be like to be the last of your kind, trapped in isolation for centuries, waiting for something that might never come. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I wish we could have been there for you sooner." Lyriel's eyes glowed faintly, a sign of her sadness. "It is not your fault, Dr. Ward. You came when you were meant to come. But now I must know what has happened to my people." "Where are they now?" Elias shook his head slowly. "I don't know, Lyriel. The galaxy has changed so much since your people were lost. We don't have the answers." She stared at him for a long moment, as if searching for something in his eyes. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer now, filled with a quiet resolve. "Then I will find the answers myself. I will search the stars for the memory of Seriphus. I will remember." Elias watched as Lyriel closed her eyes, her face serene. He could feel the determination in her words. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. She wouldn't rest until she uncovered the truth about her people, no matter how long it took. The days that followed were filled with research and exploration. Elias and Ray worked tirelessly to learn everything they could about the Seraphim. They combed through the data they had collected from the ruins, examining every symbol, every piece of information they could find. They even attempted to contact other researchers, trying to gather any knowledge they could about ancient civilizations and their connection to the Seraphim. But nothing seemed to make sense. No one knew anything about the Seraphim, and the more Elias dug, the more questions he had. Who were they? Where had they come from? Why had they vanished? And then there was Lyriel. Every day she grew stronger, more awake, as if the time she had spent sealed away was beginning to fade. She was no longer just a figure in a crystal. She was a person, a living, breathing being with hopes, dreams, and memories of a time long past. Elias watched as she spent hours sitting beneath the stars, her eyes scanning the sky, as though she were searching for something, anything, that would tell her where her people had gone. One night, as Elias sat beside her, he asked, "Do you ever wonder if they're still out there?" "Your people, I mean?" Lyriel glanced up at him, her glowing eyes soft but filled with sadness. "I used to wonder. I used to hope. But now I know that they are gone. The Ravagers took them. They destroyed everything." Her words cut deep into Elias's heart. He had never thought of it this way. He had always been a man of science, a man who believed that answers could always be found, that there was always a way forward. But Lyriel's story was different. It was not about finding the answers. It was about living with the questions. "I'm sorry," he said again, feeling the weight of his own helplessness. "I wish I could do more." "You are doing more than you know," Lyriel replied quietly, her voice full of gratitude. "You found me. You gave me a chance to remember. You gave me hope." Elias sat silently beside her, watching the stars above. He didn't know what the future held for Lyriel, or for the Seraphim. But one thing was certain. He would do everything in his power to help her find the answer she was searching for, even if it meant uncovering truths that would change the galaxy forever. The days in the desert began to blur together, each one flowing into the next as Elias, Ray, and Lyriel worked to piece together the ancient puzzle of the Seraphim. The mornings were spent examining the ruins, while the nights were filled with quiet conversations under the stars. Lyriel had opened up more, telling stories of her people and their bright, peaceful civilization. Elias could see the pain behind her words, her sadness at being the last of her kind, the weight of centuries spent in isolation. But there was also a glimmer of hope in her eyes, a quiet belief that somehow, someday, she would find answers. Elias had never felt more conflicted. On one hand, he wanted to help Lyriel, to guide her to the answers she so desperately sought. On the other hand, he knew that bringing her to the Galactic Council could be dangerous. They would study her, yes, but they would also try to control her, to use her as a weapon. Lyriel was not just an artifact to be studied. She was a person, a survivor, and a princess who had been forced to live in the shadows of her past. But with each passing day, the pressure to make a decision grew. News of Elias's discovery had reached the outer colonies, and soon officials from the Galactic Council were beginning to take notice. A small fleet of ships had already been dispatched to investigate. Their arrival was inevitable. Elias had to make a choice. Soon. It was late one evening when the decision weighed most heavily on him. Lyriel sat by the fire, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars. She had grown stronger over the last few weeks, her presence less ethereal, more grounded. Her connection to the world outside the capsule had deepened. It was clear to Elias that she no longer saw herself as just an ancient relic of a forgotten past. She was becoming something else, something more. She was a bridge between two worlds, a living link to the lost civilization of the Seraphim. Ray joined Elias, a look of concern on her face. "Elias," she began, "I've been hearing rumors. Ships are already on their way. The council won't be far behind. We need to make a decision." "What are we going to do?" Elias looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He had known the council would eventually catch wind of his discovery. But now hearing it from Ray, it felt real, like a clock ticking down to the final moment. He turned to Lyriel, who was still gazing up at the sky. "I don't want to see you turned into a weapon," Elias said quietly, his voice filled with frustration. "I don't want them to use you, Lyriel. You're not a tool. You're a person. You have a right to your freedom." Lyriel turned to him, her expression calm, though the sadness in her eyes was ever present. "I understand," she said softly. "I have spent so long alone, locked away in that crystal, waiting for a future that may never come. But I also know that I cannot run from the past. The Ravagers destroyed my people, and if they return, I must be ready." Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "We can't live in fear, Lyriel. I don't want you to live in fear. You deserve more than that. The galaxy doesn't have to be a place of war and destruction." Lyriel's eyes softened as she looked at him, You speak of peace, but you do not understand the darkness that comes from the void. I have seen it, felt it. The Ravagers are relentless. They will come again. I must prepare, Elias. It is my duty. Elias's heart twisted as he listened to her. He knew that Lyriel was right. Her people had been destroyed by a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. The Ravagers were a threat unlike any other, and they had no doubt left scars on Lyriel that would never heal. But that didn't mean she had to live in fear forever. She deserved to live to find peace, not to be a soldier in an endless war. I won't let you be a weapon, Elias said firmly. Not if I can help it. Ray watched the exchange quietly, knowing how torn Elias was. She stepped forward, her voice quiet but resolute. Elias, I know you want to protect her, but you have to face the reality. The Ravagers may be coming. We can't ignore that. If we don't do something, the Council will take matters into their own hands. You've seen the reports. They're already preparing for action. Elias turned to Ray, his jaw tight. I know, he said softly, his voice filled with the weight of a decision that was still unclear. But I can't just hand Lyriel over to them. Not like that. Not when He stopped himself, realizing how personal his words had become. She's not just some ancient discovery. She's not a thing to be controlled. She's alive. She deserves better. Ray looked at him for a long moment, understanding the struggle in his eyes. I get it, I do. But what are you going to do? We can't keep hiding her forever. The galaxy is too big. The Council will find out eventually. If we don't act, we'll lose control of the situation. Elias sighed, his shoulders sagging with the weight of the decision. He looked over at Lyriel, who was still staring at the stars. The soft glow from the fire flickered in her eyes, and for a moment, he saw the same conflict mirrored in her expression. You don't have to do this alone, Ray said gently, stepping closer. You don't have to carry the burden of this decision by yourself. Elias turned to her, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. I just don't know what the right choice is. Lyriel stood up slowly, her gaze never leaving the stars. The right choice is not always the easy choice, she said, her voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. I have lived for centuries, Elias, and in all that time I have learned one thing. The truth will always find its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it is buried. I have waited for so long to understand what happened to my people, but I can no longer hide from the past. I must face it. Elias looked at her, his heart aching. But what about your future? What about the peace you deserve? Lyriel's gaze softened. I will fight for that peace, Elias, but I will also fight for the truth, and I will not allow my people's memory to fade into the darkness. Elias nodded slowly, understanding her words. She wasn't just asking for protection. She was asking for something far deeper. She was asking for justice, for the chance to reclaim the legacy of her people. And no matter how much he wanted to protect her from the pain of her past, he knew that she could not heal unless she faced it. The decision loomed over them like a storm on the horizon. The ships from the Galactic Council were getting closer, their arrival imminent. Elias knew that the moment was coming when they would have to make their move. But what would it be? Would they turn Lyriel over to the Council? Or would they help her find the answers she sought on her own terms? That night, as the stars twinkled above and the desert wind whispered through the dunes, Elias sat beside Lyriel, his mind heavy with the weight of his decision. He looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. I'll help you, Lyriel. Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you. Lyriel's eyes met his, a look of gratitude and determination in her gaze. Thank you, Elias. You have already given me more than I could ever ask for. But the choice is mine, and I choose to face the past no matter what it holds. As the morning sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Elias knew that whatever choice they made, the consequences would be far-reaching. The future of the galaxy could be shaped by the actions they took in the coming days. But one thing was certain. Lyriel's journey was far from over. And neither Elias nor Ray could turn back now. They had found the last of the Seraphim, and the galaxy would never be the same. The days following the decision felt like a quiet storm, building up slowly, each hour heavier than the last. The choices they had made had set them on a path that would lead them to the stars, and to truths they couldn't yet comprehend. The ships from the Galactic Council were drawing closer, their arrival unavoidable. It was only a matter of time before everything would change. Elias and Ray had spent every moment preparing. They had packed the necessary equipment, checked the scanners, and verified the data. Yet despite all the practical steps, Elias couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. He had made the right choice, he told himself. They couldn't let Lyriel fall into the hands of those who would use her as a tool of war. But the fear of the unknown still lingered. And then there was Lyriel herself. She had grown stronger over the last few weeks, her presence more solid, her connection to the world around her more vivid. She wasn't just a princess who had awoken from a long sleep. She was a living piece of history, a survivor, and a beacon for something far greater than they had realized. Elias had tried to prepare her, to help her understand that the galaxy had changed since her people had fallen. The once thriving city of Seraphis was now nothing more than a memory, a place lost to time. But Lyriel wasn't interested in running away from her past. She had made peace with it, even if it was still painful. "I'm ready," Lyriel said one evening as they stood beneath the stars. Her voice had a quiet resolve to it now, like someone who had come to terms with the weight of their journey. Elias turned to her, his heart aching at the thought of what was to come. "Are you sure? You don't have to do this. You can stay here hidden away." Lyriel shook her head gently, her glowing eyes filled with both sorrow and strength. "I can't hide anymore. My people deserve to be remembered. Their legacy, my legacy, must not be forgotten." Elias didn't know what to say. He had always believed in the power of knowledge, of uncovering the truth. But Lyriel was different. She wasn't searching for knowledge for the sake of science. She was searching for her place in a galaxy that had moved on without her. A galaxy that had forgotten the seraphim. "I understand," Elias said softly, his voice heavy with the weight of his promise. "We'll make sure your people's story is known. We'll make sure you have the future you deserve." The morning the Galactic Council's fleet arrived, the atmosphere around their camp shifted. There was a sense of inevitability in the air, like the calm before a storm. The Council had sent a small armada to investigate the site, with an envoy of diplomats and military officers. They were ready to take control of the situation, to secure Lyriel and study her whether she wanted it or not. Elias, Ray, and Lyriel stood together, watching the ships descend from the sky, their engines roaring softly as they touched down on the sandy plain. The ships were sleek and metallic, their surfaces reflecting the harsh desert light. They were imposing, symbols of authority, power, and control. Ray looked at Elias. "This is it," she said quietly, her voice filled with both fear and determination. "We've come this far. No turning back now." Elias nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I know, let's just hope they'll listen." But he wasn't sure if they would. The Council had always been interested in power. Knowledge was just a tool to them. Elias had always been skeptical of their motives. And now they were coming for Lyriel. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything she had been through. As the ships landed, the first of the Council's officials emerged. They were dressed in the standard attire of the Galactic Council, sharp uniforms with insignia denoting their rank. The leader of the group, a woman with dark eyes and a stern expression, stepped forward. She was flanked by several armed guards, all of them carrying the symbols of the Council's military branch. "Dr. Ward," the woman said, her voice cold but respectful, "I trust you have been expecting us." Elias stepped forward, keeping his voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through him. "Yes, I have. But I need to make one thing clear from the start. Lyriel is not a prisoner. She is a person, not an object of study." The woman raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to being spoken to like that. "I'm afraid you misunderstand, Dr. Ward. The Galactic Council has determined that the Seraphim are of great historical interest. We must learn everything about their civilization. The survival of one of their people is unprecedented. It is not just your discovery. It belongs to the entire galaxy." Elias clenched his fists, fighting the urge to react angrily. "No," he said, his voice firm. "Lyriel is not a relic. She has her own life, her own choices to make. You don't have the right to treat her like a specimen." Lyriel stepped forward, her glowing eyes locking onto the Council representative. "You don't have the right to speak for me," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "I have lived too long in the shadow of my people's death. I am not a trophy to be studied. I am their memory, their legacy, and I will not be controlled." The woman's expression faltered for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty passing through her, but she quickly recovered, her gaze hardening once again. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Lyriel," she said. "The Ravagers are still out there. You may think you can escape your past, but you can't. The Council will protect you. Lyriel's eyes narrowed. Protection? Is that what you call it, control? I will not hide behind your walls. I will not be a weapon for you to use against an enemy I don't even know. Elias watched the exchange, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. Lyriel wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for all of her people, for the Seraphim, whose memory had been lost to the ravages of time. I won't go with you, Lyriel said, her voice steady. Not unless you allow me to seek the truth about my people. Not unless you allow me to find the stars again. The council representative hesitated, clearly taken aback by Lyriel's words. For a moment, the air was thick with tension. The guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to proceed. Finally, the woman nodded, though her expression remained stern. We will consider your request, she said, but the Galactic Council cannot simply stand by and let this opportunity slip through our fingers. We will need a response from you soon. With that, the council delegation turned and began to walk back to their ships. Elias, Ray, and Lyriel stood silently watching them go. The tension between them hung in the air like a storm cloud, but they had won a small victory. Lyriel had spoken for herself. She had claimed her place in the galaxy. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. The council had left, but they had made it clear that they would not let the matter rest. Elias knew that Lyriel's fight wasn't over, but for the first time since they had met, he saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a voice. She had people who would stand by her no matter what. That night, as they sat around the campfire, Lyriel spoke quietly, her eyes fixed on the flames. I never thought I would see the stars again. I never thought I would have a chance to reclaim the legacy of my people. But you've given me that chance. You've given me more than I could ever ask for. Elias smiled, his heart full of a quiet pride. It's not over yet, Lyriel. But we'll figure it out. Together. Lyriel looked at him, a soft, almost imperceptible smile on her face. Together, she repeated. The future was still uncertain. The council had made its move and the galaxy was changing faster than they could keep up. But for the first time, Lyriel had a chance to live her life on her own terms, to reclaim her people's memory, and to find a place in a galaxy that had long forgotten her. No matter what the council decided, Lyriel was no longer a prisoner of the past. She was a survivor, a princess, and a symbol of hope. Her legacy, the legacy of the Seraphim, would live on among the stars.